Hello, Corey here from the BachScholar YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today. I have a very interesting video for you today, and I think you'll really enjoy it. This is a video discussing tempo in the works of Joplin, tempo and ragtime. I'm only talking about Joplin here, not other ragtime composers. But I'll be talking specifically about Joplin's slow march tempo rag. So basically all of Joplin's works in 2/4 time, not the waltzes or anything like that. So all the pieces in 2/4 time. You may have noticed on my channel, if you follow my channel, over the past couple weeks, I've been uploading a lot of Scott Joplin rags, and there's a reason for this. Let me let you in on a little secret here. I am planning to record the complete works of Scott Joplin in the very near future, most likely in the next year. So I'll have this finished within probably a year. It's April 2022 as I speak now. And I'm experimenting with different tempi and different characters and my interpretations. So I've been uploading these Joplin videos for a good reason. I'm sort of solidifying my interpretations and really listening to them carefully and deciding what I want for each rag when I get to doing my recording, my audio recording. When I started YouTube in 2008, I had in mind of recording Joplin's complete works, but I never had the resources, never really had the opportunity to do that. But an opportunity has come up for me now, to where it will be very doable in the next year. And I'll be able to make actually professional level audio recordings. Many of my YouTube videos, especially the older ones, were made on a kind of a crappy camera, and the audio isn't really that great. The videos are really good. The audios just sometimes aren't that great, in my ragtime videos. And now that I'm 13 to 14 years older than I was when I began making YouTube videos, I've really changed a lot of my interpretations, and that's a good thing, because you don't want to stagnate. You don't want to spend your whole life playing something exactly the same way for your whole life. Everyone evolves. Everyone changes through time, and now that I'm approaching 60, actually I just turned 59 last month. I approach things differently than I did in my 40s. And I'm sure when I'm in my 60s or 70s, or 80s, if I live that long, I'll probably most likely approach things differently then. So we all evolve as human beings and as musicians, and you're always reevaluating what you've done in the past and how you want to do it now. That's a good thing. You don't want to stagnate. So when I listen to some of my old recordings, like I don't know, my first recording of Fig Leaf Rag from 2012, I kind of cringe. I think, my God, that's fast. I really played that thing fast. I mean, it was good for the time. I really like that, but now that I'm getting ready to make this complete Joplin recording, I'm really changing my views, like dramatically changing my views. My tempo in 2012 for Fig Leaf Rag was 84. My tempo now is 54. That's 30 beats per minute slower. And I have good reason why I'm doing that. I don't play it at 54 because I'm getting bad and my technique is terrible and I can't play 84 anymore. I'm playing 54 for good reasons, for musical reasons, and for reasons that you'll see later in this video when I do my marching demonstration. So I've really changed a lot of my views on Joplin's rags, especially with regards to tempo. And I consider myself to be something of a scholar of tempo. I have a very special and unique system of tempo that I've developed. I actually developed it way back in the 1990s, and when I was in graduate school, actually. And it's an excellent system. It allows me to determine what I believe are ideal tempi for pieces of music, not just ragtime, but all pieces of music. So if you want to learn more about my tempo system, I think I have another video or two about that, or you can go to my website also. I think the BachScholar website has an article or two on that. Or if it doesn't, I'll probably have one in the near future. So I have a very special system of tempo. I am a tempo scholar. I believe that tempo can make or break performances, but also at the same time, great musicians and great pianists can make what are otherwise bad tempi seem good. Because if you're a really good musician, you can make a poor tempo sound good. So it's really the whole concept of tempo is, it's a very it's very difficult to just nail down. It's very difficult. Tempo's probably the most elusive concept in musical performance. Anyway, that's a little introduction. So a little introduction as to why I'm making this video. I'm very interested in tempo. Okay, now first I want to, in a few minutes from now, I have a demonstration. I have a different camera angle, and I have a marching demonstration in which I demonstrate slow march tempi. I have a book here. This is actually a book on Johann Sebastian Bach, but I'm pretending that this is a novel, all right? I went to the bookstore and bought a nice big novel, and I'm going to curl up by the fireplace in the next few days and read this novel. I just open up the book and it says, warning, never read the words in this novel fast. It is never correct to read novels fast. What would you do? Does that sound familiar? Never play this piece fast. It is never right to play ragtime fast. Why is it okay for Joplin to do that, but an author would never think of doing that in a book? Okay, imagine another scenario. You buy this novel in the store, you bring it home, you open it up, and it says, author's note. This novel must be read at precisely 100 words per minute. That would be, that would probably anger people enough to bring the novel back and not read it. Like, who is he, even the author? Who is the author to tell the reader, you have to read this at a certain speed? That's absolutely ludicrous. Well then, when you get a piece of music, like the fig leaf rag, for example, slow march tempo, quarter note equals 100. Basically, whoever put that in 100 there, could have been Joplin, it could have been his publisher, it could have been the person who engraved the music. That's basically telling you that, you have to play 100. And well, a lot of pianists interpret it that way. I mean, I don't interpret it that way, but a lot of pianists think, oh, you have to play 100 because it says 100. Not just on this, but on anything, any piece of music. If there's a metronome mark, you have to do that because that's the gospel truth. That's the word of God. You can't question that because Joplin put 100 there and you can't question that. Well, would you think the same thing if you had a novel and the author of the novel specified in there that you have to read this at a certain number of words per minute? Of course not. This is ludicrous. So the point I'm making here is that tempo is a personal choice. Tempo is not, there's no such thing as one correct tempo for any piece of music, even if the composer says so. Even if Beethoven said, even if his controversial metronome marks in the Hammerklavier Sonata, Beethoven put metronome marks in his Hammerklavier Sonata, and a lot of literalists take that to mean the gospel truth, like you have to play these tempi because Beethoven marked these tempi, and if you don't, it's wrong. Well, most of them are impossible, actually physically impossible to do. Even if you could do them, you don't want to. It's not musical. If you try to play Fig Leaf Rag at 100, it suffers. You can't even do it. You get to the third section and you'll crash and burn. There are a couple other rags with quarter note equals 100. Pineapple rag is one of them. Sugar cane is another one. Those can be done at 100 per quarter note, but I think they're a little too fast, but they can definitely be done at 100. The first point I'm trying to make before I go and demonstrate with my slow march tempi and I do some marching for you, I just want to bring up the video by Ron Odell from the YouTube channel Keeper First. Ron Odell made a video back in 2014 on ragtime tempi, and Ron argues that everyone plays ragtime too slow. You know, we're all doing it too slow, or at least that's the kind of message I got from it. That Ron argues that the standard march tempo, like for a Sousa march, is about 120 or so. Therefore, 100 is a good slow march tempo. And so he takes 100 per quarter note for various reasons as being the sort of standard default slow march tempo speed for Joplin's rags. I think this is ludicrous. It's way too fast. And yes, I do agree we need to be able to march to these pieces. They are marches, okay? So if you take my newest tempo for Fig Leaf Rag, if you listen to my newest interpretation, which most likely will be the way I play it in my recording that I'm planning, I play Fig Leaf Rag at 54. Quarter note is 54. Most people would think, oh, that's way too slow. You can never march to 54. But I beg to differ, because I'll demonstrate in this next segment on the slow march tempo that it is very possible and actually better to play Fig Leaf Rag at half speed. That is, it's marked 100 per quarter. 100 is not in my tempo scale of all the sort of magic tempi that I use, but 108 is, and 96 also is. So, but I take it at 54. So my tempo for Fig Leaf Rag is almost half the speed of what this is marked. And you will see that in a few minutes in my marching demonstration. Now, before that, I just want to go over another thing. When pianists see Joplin's works, and they'll notice that most of them are marked slow march tempo, of course, or not too fast or not fast. Many of them have that warning in there that I've never liked. I never liked those warnings. Warning, never play this piece fast. You know, it's like the world will blow up if you play it fast or something. I've never liked those warnings because it's like putting a warning in a novel that you shouldn't read it fast. Well, when you look through Joplin's works, most pianists will probably get the impression that, oh, there's one ragtime tempo and all ragtime pieces in 2/4 need to be the same speed because they're all slow march tempo and they should all be the same. My argument is that there's a large spectrum. For example, I play Maple Leaf Rag the fastest out of all of Joplin's rags, and I play Solace the slowest. My tempo for Maple Leaf Rag is 96. My tempo for Solace is 42. My tempo for Solace is less than half the speed I play for Maple Leaf Rag. And then all of the other rags I select tempi in the middle. So as a pianist and as a performer, you need to decide where this rag and that rag fall. Should this rag be slower or faster than this next rag? Should this rag be, where should this rag be on the entire spectrum? So these are the things that I deal with when I solidify my interpretation. I just want to show you an example here. I'm going to play a little bit of Maple Leaf Rag at what I consider to be the ideal tempo, 96. This is 96 per quarter note. Nice speed. Most people would probably agree that's a good speed for it. You can certainly do it slower, but I think that out of all of Joplin's rags in 2/4, I think Maple Leaf Rag deserves to be in the fastest category. There may be other rags that also fall into that category. So I make categories in my rags. Now, another category I have is 72. 72. So 72 seems to be more of the sort of average or median speed of Joplin's rags. I play the Entertainer at 72. So I'm going to show you, this is what I consider to be the sort of ideal speed for the Entertainer. Nice energetic speed, but not too fast. You might like it slower, but that's another point. I'm not trying to argue for the tempo 72. I'm just showing you that this is what I consider to be sort of the ideal tempo out of my tempo scale for the Entertainer. Now let's try the opposite. Let's try to play Maple Leaf Rag at my Entertainer speed and see what happens. This is my Entertainer speed. Okay, you can do it. Certainly you can do that. You're free to do whatever you want to do. If you're and it depends on your abilities. If you can't play it faster, if that's all that your technique will allow you to do, then fine, you can do that. 72, it's a perfectly okay speed for Maple Leaf Rag. But I think it's too slow. I think it's actually much too slow for Maple Leaf Rag. Now, let's do the opposite. Let's take my Maple Leaf Rag tempo, 96, and I'm going to try to play the Entertainer in my Maple Leaf Rag tempo. Now, that's ridiculous. No one would do that. No one would play the Entertainer that fast. It's just all a big jumbled mess with the octaves and everything. So the point I'm making here is one rag sounds great at a faster speed. Another rag sounds the best at a slower speed, but you can't switch them around. If you play the slower speed for the faster piece, it will suffer, and if you play the faster tempo for the slower piece will suffer. So either way, both will suffer. This proves, what I'm doing here is I'm proving a point here. This proves that not all rags have the same tempo. I get the impression that a lot of pianists think that, oh, there's just one rag tempo because everything is a slow march tempo, therefore everything is 60 or whatever, or everything is 72. But do you see how boring the world would be if all of Joplin's rags, 50-something of them, were all played at the same tempo? You need to have variance. So your job as a performer and a pianist is to figure out which rags are faster, which rags are slower, which ones fall into the same kind of categories, and that's sort of what I've been doing over the last several years, actually. I do change my opinions over time, but I still use my tempo scale. My tempo scale consists of 42, 48, 54, 63, 72, 84, 96, 108. Those are the only tempi I use for pieces in 2/4 or 4/4 time that don't have triplets in them. Triplet tempi have a different column in my matrix. So very interesting. Lots of points I make here. Let's review the points before I demonstrate my marching video. The point is, number on the page is just a number on the page. If it says quarter note is 72, like on Eugenia here, it doesn't mean you have to play 72. The world will not explode if you play slower or faster than that. 100 per quarter note is not, as I will demonstrate and I will prove in my next portion of this video, 100 per quarter note is not the standard slow march tempo. It is way too fast. I argue something very radical. I argue actually that slow march tempo means half march tempo. Half march tempo. And I will show you that in this next portion. So stay tuned and you can see me march a little bit and discuss marching tempi and the slow march tempo in Joplin's works. Okay, so here I am in my marching studio, and I have a metronome app here on a phone, and I'm going to do a little experimentation with some march tempi. As Ron Odell makes the point in his video about historical ragtime tempi, one of the major point he makes is that these are marches. Of course, Joplin's rags are first and foremost marches, slow march tempo, but how slow is slow? And do we need to be able to march to these pieces? Well, I say yes, we do need to be able to march to them. We don't know how slow is slow, but I'm going to put it on 120. So I have the metronome on 120, and 120 seems to be somewhere around the sort of most popular default speed for marching, for a nice energetic march. Okay, it's pretty easy. 120. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You can try that. Put it on 120 and try to march. It's a pretty fast march, but that's a nice sort of generic kind of John Philip Sousa march tempo. He also references 112. So of course, that same kind of march, relatively energetic march, can be slowed down just a bit to 112. Here's 112. Bum 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 bum. Yes, perfect. Perfect march tempo, 112. So now, Ron makes the argument that, therefore, if a standard sort of Sousa march is around 120 or maybe 112 or maybe perhaps in the 130s, he also references a recording by John Philip Sousa from the late 1800s, I think, in which he conducts I think the Stars and Stripes Forever at 138. So 138 is pretty fast. It can still be marched. Let's look at 138 first before I try another speed. Okay, 138. Bum bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum ba dum bum bum. Yeah, that's a 138 is a very energetic march. So now, okay, so Ron makes the argument. I was going to talk about this a second ago, but Ron makes the argument that therefore, since historical marches are perhaps in the 130s or 120s, or maybe 112 perhaps at the slowest, that slow march tempo means somewhere around 100, because 100 is taking it a little slower than the normal kind of default march tempo of 120. Now, he makes references to several or a few pieces that rags that have quarter note equals 100 marked. And he makes the argument that this is the standard tempo for Joplin's rags, 100. And he plays a recording of Joseph Lamb playing the Sensation rag at about 100. And there are other rags marked 100. The ones that come to mind offhand are Fig Leaf Rag, which I've talked about already, and Pineapple Rag, and also Sugar Cane. I believe those are the three rags that are marked quarter note equals 100 in Joplin's works. And those pieces, they can, I guess, be played at 100. Sugar Cane and Pineapple Rag definitely can be played at 100. I think it's a little too fast for them, but they can be played. Fig Leaf Rag, it's almost impossible to play that at 100 when you get to the third section, which is very difficult with the octaves. So, you know, these tempi need to be revised a little bit. Now, 100. So here's 100. I'm going to test out 100 for marching. So this is what Ron says is the standard slow march tempo. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, bum, bum. Good, perfect. Perfect. I wouldn't necessarily call that slow, that's more moderate, but it's very easy to march at 100 if you take one step per 100. Okay, here's the point though. The thing is, few people realize that if you can march to 120, you can march to 60, half of that. If you can march to 138, like the fast example that he gives, you can march at 69, which is half of 138. If you can march at 100, you can march at 50. I'll show you that. Let's take 50. Okay, here's 50. This is half speed of what Ron says is the standard sort of default slow march tempo. 50, that's a really slow speed. Okay, most people would say, oh, you can't do it. You can't march to 50. Dum, bum, bum, bum. Yeah, I agree. That's almost not marchable. But what about this? No one ever thinks about this. Take eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2. So marching at 50 for 2 steps per click, that would be your marching at eighth notes, is the same as doing 1 step per quarter note at 100. You see, so it's very easy to march at 50. In fact, I'm going to put it really slow. I'm going to put my slowest speed. This is what I play for solace. I play solace at 42 beats per minute. 42, quarter note equals 42. Most people would think, oh, you can't march to that. It's impossible, therefore it's wrong. You have to play it faster. Let's try to march. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yes, that's too slow to march. But let's take the eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and very, very easy. 1, very easy. So marching at 42 per eighth note is exactly the same as marching 84 per quarter note. You see the point? So anything you can march at speeds of 100 plus, you can march at from 50 up to like about 70. So that's 42 is my standard tempo. That's what I consider to be the sort of my perfect ideal tempo for solace. I'm marching perfectly. I'm taking a step for each eighth note. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So if you were to listen to my solace at 42, you could march to that. Now I'm going to take my next fastest tempo in my tempo scale, 48. So a tiny bit faster. 48. My newest recording or my newest video of Heliotrope Bouquet, I play it at 48. Most people would think, oh, that's way too slow. Way too slow. Well, Joplin and Louis Chauvin mark slow drag. A lot of people forget the slow drag. They say slow march tempo, yes, but it's a slow drag. So my tempo is 48. Most people would think, oh, that's way too slow. You can't do a march to that. Well, yes, you can. If you take eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 1. Da 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 dun da 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 dum da dum bum bum. Da da do 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 do. Perfect. That's an absolutely perfect slow march speed. 48. That would be the same as doing 96 per quarter note. That would be like doing Maple Leaf Rag at 96 per quarter note. Okay, now let's go to the next fastest speed in my tempo scale, 54. 54 is pretty slow. I've recently adopted this as my sort of standard slow drag tempo. This is what I currently play Sunflower slow drag at. Most people would think, oh, that's way too slow. You can't march to that, 54. And they think of 1, 2, 1. It's drudgery. It's very slow. But if you just simply do the eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 1, 2 and 1, you have a nice, actually moderate march speed. Moderate march speed. It's not even slow. It's kind of a little bit fast, actually. So you don't have to play Sunflower slow drag up like 80 or beyond in order for it to be a slow march tempo. You can do the opposite. I play it at 54, and I think it's a perfect slow march tempo. So my next speed in my tempo scale is 63. Let's take 63. 63, I think a lot of rags have the tempo of 63, I think. It's a nice, moderate kind of speed that's not too fast and not too slow. So now when you start to get into the 60s and 70s, it becomes almost possible to do quarter note steps to the march. Or if it's more of an energetic kind of 63, like Eugenia, I play Eugenia at 63 right now. Do 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 Actually, I like you can do a little quarter note. The quarter notes are a little slow to march to, but you can do a faster march also to the eighth notes. So it's definitely possible to do a march of some kind at 63. Then the next fastest speed in my tempo scale is 72. There are a lot of rags that have the tempo 72. I think 72 is the most common out of all the tempi that I play in Scott Joplin's work. 72 is, then once you get to about 72, you start to become fast enough to where you can pretty much, you can march for quarter note steps. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. That's a nice slow march tempo, 72. That's what Joplin marks for Eugenia. I happen to like it a little slower than that, at least now. I think there was a time when I played Eugenia at 72, but I definitely play, what's a piece I play at 72? I play Peacherine Rag. Peacherine Rag's a good example. So that's a perfect slow march tempo, 72. See, the fast people like Ron O'Dell would argue, oh no, you have to get to 100. But they don't understand that it's when you're doing the really slow tempi, you need to march to the eighth notes, not the quarter notes. So you're changing the note values. But once you get to like about 72, as I just said, then it becomes possible to start marching to the quarter note speeds. So after 72, which is probably the most common speed, is 84. 84 is what I consider to be one of the faster ragtime speeds that I play. A good example of 84 is Elite Syncopations. So Elite Syncopations I play at 84, and it's very easy to march to, slow march tempo. Perfect. Actually, 84 is probably the perfect slow march tempo. But like I said, probably I play more rags at around 72 than I do at 84. And then, as I mentioned before, 96 is my fastest 2/4 Joplin speed, which I play for, a good example is Maple Leaf Rag. This is very close to 100. So that the speed that Ron O'Dell advocates for the default speed for most rags, like everything is measured against 100, is actually the fastest. So I think he's mistaken. I think Ron is mistaken. 100, this is 96. 100 is not in my tempo scale, so I don't play anything at 100. I try to play it at 96. That's the fastest. After 96 is 108. But instead of playing 108 for something, like for Fig Leaf Rag, for example, my most recent recording of Fig Leaf Rag, I do it at 54. This is almost half the speed of what it's marked. It's marked quarter note equals 100. Well, my speed is quarter note equals 54. Most people would think, oh, that's way, way too slow. You can't march to that. Here's 54. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 do do dum, da 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 da. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So it's very easy. Actually, it's a nice moderate speed march if you march to the eighth notes. So the point I'm making here is that you can march pretty much any speed If the quarter note becomes too slow, you simply march to the eighth notes. And it works perfectly well, perfectly fine. So most rags in my system have the tempi of, let's say if the fastest is 96 and you have a few that are 84, they're also fast. The vast majority of rags are 72 and slower. 72 and slower. This means that this actually suggests that slow, if the standard kind of march tempo is 120, half of 120 is 60, this suggests something very radical actually. That this suggests that slow march tempo means something like half march tempo. Because if you take a half of an energetic, like a Sousa march, if you take half of 120, you get 60. You can still march to that if you march to the eighth notes. See? So I argue that slow march tempo means half speed. I don't think slow march tempo just means you take 120 and you take a little slower than 120 and 100 is the standard speed for Joplin's rags. That's way too fast. No. I say the standard march tempo for a Sousa march is 120 and you take it down half speed to 60 and you march to the eighth notes. This is my argument. So unless anyone can prove me wrong, I argue that slow march tempo means half speed. Think about that for a little bit. Experiment with tempi and Joplin rags, do a little marching with a metronome, and see if you agree with me.